Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And with Mists of Pandaria Classic right around the corner, in today's video, I wanted to cover the specializations and how powerful they are in PvP and my expectations for them, because Mists of Pandaria Classic, I think, is going to be different than the original Mists of Pandaria experience, given that it is going to be the end of expansion game balance and class tuning in the initial stages gear, which could have some different ramifications and different expectations, because there are certain metas that people remember from the expansion that may not just exist at all, given the fact that it's going to be season 15 tuning. And I wanted to just share my thoughts, because Mists of Pandaria was one of the expansions where I did really good in competitively for PvP. There are some things that I fondly remember. There are some things that I don't so fondly remember, as there is basically with every expansion when it comes to WoW PvP. And I just wanted to break it down for you. If you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Arms Warrior. Now, if you guys remember the BlizzCon tournaments, Arms Warrior Mage Resto Druid was one of the more common compositions. It was really good at slaying Resto Shamans and slaying Warlocks. That was kind of its niche situation. It had a lot of different compositions outside of that as well. You could play with Hunters, so it had some variety. You could play with Feral Druids, play Melee Cleaves, play with Unholy Death Knights. It had a great amount of variety. However, the initial stages of Mists of Pandaria, it had things like Taste for Blood stacks. It was getting these big one-shots. I don't think it's going to be hitting those types of numbers, given that it's the season 15 balance, but I think it's still likely going to maintain really good momentum. It had a ton of disruption. It had multiple interrupts. It had multiple stuns. It had tons of mobility, being able to intervene to your own banners and escape from roots. It was really well-rounded, a solid pick with a lot of variety. I think it's likely going to provide a really good experience in Mists of Pandaria, but I would not say that it is necessarily God, so I'm going to put it up here onto the best tier. Resto Druid, on the other hand, is an absolutely phenomenal healer, just mostly instant cast. The Soul of the Forest quick cast cyclones are really fun in order to get through interrupts really effectively. And you were most commonly paired with a Frost Mage, and this was because of the Druid ability Symbiosis, which allowed you to share Ice Block from them. So you could basically compose a composition, which at the time was called God Comp, and it was because the three specializations on that composition had a way to go immune to damage, and Ice Block was that method for Resto Druid. So it had really good control, lots of CC chains, really disruptive. Displacer Beast to teleport around the map was really effective. In its initial phase, though, being able to blink it, you could blink and go into stealth with the first iteration of Displacer Beast. I don't think the stealth component is going to be in MoP Classic initially. I do kind of worry that it might struggle a bit in the earlier seasons, just trying to keep up with overall throughput, given that stats are going to be a bit lower. I want to say that it's God tier based on its previous experience. It was one of the best healers by a large margin, but it won one of the BlizzCons for Mists of Pandaria with Elemental Shaman Warlock, which was the other common matchup, because you could get Portal from a Warlock, so you could use Portal with a Warlock. That was pretty fun. I think overall, I don't think you're going to feel bad with this. It's just a matter of whether or not I want to say it was God or it was best, given that it's going to be the end of expansion game balance in the first season. I'm going to probably lean onto the side that it's probably more God than not. I think it was really good from memory. Although I do remember it kind of struggling towards the end of the expansion with kind of Resto Shaman Warlock compositions more so. But I think it could still likely overcome that, especially now with how modernized the gameplay is and access to add-ons and things like that. I think running down a Shaman and just killing them in deep freeze is going to be a lot easier to do than it was in original Mists of Pandaria, and Resto Druid's probably going to be one of the best healers to do that with. Feral Druid had multiple patches where people thought it was absolute godlike, and Trent Stun was one of those patches. So you could summon in these Trents that would stun for like 1.5 seconds. It didn't DR, so you could just you could just stun everything. Nobody could play their character. I remember it being really good at tearing into Resto Shamans and training down healers and kind of zugging in like that. A lot of people played Feral Druid Arms Warrior throughout the mid points of Mists of Pandaria, but I do remember it kind of disappearing a bit towards the end. But I don't want to underestimate it, because in my Cataclysm tier list, I think I underestimated Feral a little bit, and Feral Druid Hunter ended up being a really powerful composition in the earlier patch of Cataclysm Classic for PvP, and I could see that being the case again for Feral Druid. I think it was decently well-rounded. I think I might hold a little bit of reservations for it, just based on the history of Mists of Pandaria, but I do think it has some potential, so we'll just say that it's great for now. I also don't want everything showing up on the same tier, because it's hard to delineate it. Do note that if I put something on the left and I put something on the right, it means the thing on the left I think is better than the right. So like top to bottom means best to worst. Left to right also means best to worst. But I think it's likely going to be still a really good pick. Just a really good healer slayer. It was decently durable, great mobility. I remember it doing, decently well, but it didn't really stand out as like a capstone specialization, at least at like the highest tournament level. Frost Mage was absolutely bonkers. Like this is by far the spec to play in the expansion. You had Alter Time, which saved all of your Ice Lance procs, so you could just dump all your procs, alter back, dump all your procs again. You could deep freeze, cold snap, deep freeze another target, deep freeze one target, MCS another target, stop them from casting, stop them from kicking you. You could control the entire team. You had Frost Bomb, big one-shot KO hits. Like Frost Mage was absolutely god tier. I will say that for sure. I remember just absolutely annihilating people. One of the best times to play Frost Mage if you want to just be really OP on a Frost Mage. But it's a lot of keybinds. Mists of Pandaria across all of these specs is probably the highest keybind density of any expansion ever, but it's absolutely remarkably strong. From my memory, really durable. I think Flame Glow. Now, Flame Glow came in WAD. It was still really tough to take down, even despite that. And its synergy with Resto Druid is likely going to net it a spot in a lot of compositions. But I think Shadow Priest Mage was probably the most common. But you can play Warrior Mage. You can play Warlock Mage. Didn't see a lot of Boomkin Mage. Now we're actually moving on to Boomkin, which is my specialization. Oddly enough, the strength of Boomkin and Mists of Pandaria was its ability to heal. You had access to talents like Cenarian Ward, which is really strong, and Heart of the Wild, which is really strong. It basically became a double healer for like 45 seconds. I think the duration of it was, if it's different than that. It was a decent amount of time that you'd be able to have Heart of the Wild up, and you could toss out these huge heal over time effects. Boomkin never had this level of healing I've seen since then. You also had Trent Root. It wasn't Trent Stun, but Trent Root, which is off global roots. So you could go for like root beams with the Trents. And they also just tossed out ranged damage. You had really good AoE splash damage. It was kind of a dampener spec though. I think everyone's going to be playing Warlock Boomkin. Simba, if you're playing a Boomkin comp, Rogue was just not that good in Mists of Pandaria, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. You could get Unending Resolve through Symbiosis onto Warlock, which is really cool. You got that Aura Mastery and Shield Wall effect, which is a really fun combo. You could also give Shaman Stealth. I remember doing that a couple times playing with Resto Shamans and giving them stealth so they couldn't get opened on and get trained by some of these Zugging specs. I always thought that was really funny. You got Purge as a Boomkin. Which maybe, in hindsight, maybe I could have abused that harder in previous iterations. It had really good AoE damage. You were just playing AoE compositions. I don't know if I want to say it's God or best, because I do think its main weaknesses were getting crowd controlled. Any team that just trained your healer and crowd controlled you was the most difficult matchup. So any Hunter team would just Scatter Trap Boomkin, train the healer. It became really tough. And I think train the healer meta in the first season is likely to be pretty common. So I'm going to put it a little bit lower, even though despite, the final tournament was technically won by Balanced Druid. It was a very close series. It went to the absolute last game. Players couldn't play with add-ons. If they could play with add-ons, I don't think the Boomkin would have won. I think that the Mage compositions with add-ons, tracking DRs and things like that, was actually a lot better. But back then you didn't play with add-ons. So again, if you're looking at history and trying to determine like the strength, I'm also considering ladder and tournament play. I think given now with the development of the game, I think it could be very squishy. And its downside was just getting CC'd, and there was so much CC in the game. Even though you were immune to polymorph, you get CC'd by every other CC imaginable in a lot of cases. So I'm gonna hold it down from God, but it was definitely really solid. Fire Mage, I think this is the expansion everybody remembers. Hansel. You could get really fun shatters with it, but I don't think it was as good as Frost. I'm going to put it probably like here. I'm going to go a little bit lower with it. I think Frost just had way better control. I think Deep Freeze is one of the main. Actually, I think you might have had Deep Freeze as fire. Now my memory's not serving me 100% on this. Somebody remembers that, please let me know. But I remember fire being okay, but everybody pretty much played Frost. I think there might have been like an occasional fire god comp that would pop up every once in a while. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a little better than that. I'll leave it up here. I think it might be a little bit better than that, but most people preferred Frost. Maybe it's going to have a better run the second time. Again, this is kind of a bit of speculation given on my experience from personally playing it and having seen and analyzed what's happened so far with previous classic expansions. It could have a decent run. So I'll leave it at great, but I think most people are going to prefer to play Frost. Arcane is kind of a meme. I think I remember it just fully being a meme. I think I actually played with Mitch Jones, and he wanted to play Arcane. and it was just you could get this big cheesy one shot, but it was very easy to see coming. I'm going to put it on average, I think. In comparison, I think it's just these were very, very much so reliable, and this was kind of more just a cheese mechanic. Beast Mastery Hunter. This one is really tough because in the initial stages of MoP, you had Stampede, which is one-shot people, but by season 15, that was removed. So unless there's like a bug and it doesn't get removed, I think most hunters are going to be playing Marksmanship over Beast Mastery in the initial stage. I still think it ended up being good. I also think that the patch is past the goat meta where you had goats that had Curse of Tongues AoEing around, which was really common for a while, but I even think in that patch most people played marksman. So I think Beastmaster is definitely going to be good, maybe even great, but I'm going to hold it down a little bit. I could maybe put it on great and then put marksman on good or something like that, but I think marksman is likely going to be the go-to hunter spec. Survival had some really fun AoE builds, honestly. If you wanted to play like a dot spec, you could play Survival Hunter and multi-shot. It was really good in Battlegrounds. It did insane AoE damage because of that, but its burst was not there. So I think it was okay, but not spectacular throughout the expansion. And then Marksmanship Hunter, I think I'm anticipating this to kind of just be the best spec. Maybe I'm trying to remember exactly if because I played in a tournament against HLS, Hunter Lock Shaman, and I'm pretty sure the Hunter was marksman for that and not survival. I think the silencing shot was just really good extra instant CC. I'm like 99% sure marksman is going to end up being the kind of go-to hunter spec. Maybe BM is a little bit better though than survival, especially in the earlier patch when stats are lower. It's possible that BM could run people over. And it was really counter to mage. I just remember marksmanship hunters and enhancement shamans just one-shotting mages. It was kind of like a rock, paper, scissors triangle. It was really good. Mistweaver Monk is super sleeper, especially with healing spheres, because in this expansion, you had a mechanic where you could put spheres on the ground and you could target them under players' feet. You had to aim them with your mouse. And players who were really good at it would do insane amounts of healing. You could not keep up with them. Main downside was weaknesses to CC. So, getting trapped or getting sheeped. You were really weak to Hunter and Mage, but you were really strong against anything else because you could get all of this instant healing and basically be untouchable. And you had dematerialized. So when you got stunned, you weren't really a target. So you were a lot harder to kill than other healers like Shaman. So you could be like interchangeable between a monk and a shaman, depending on if you thought your healer was going to get trained. It was really good, but it wasn't enough, even played at the highest level in tournament play, to ultimately take on the druids and the resto shamans. So I think that does kind of, I'm going to hold it a little bit, but this could be super sleeper, easily super sleeper specialization to consider, but I'm going to hold it back a little bit. Holy Paladin, I don't remember a lot of because I feel like I almost never saw it. It was pretty much only resto druid, resto shaman, and Mistweaver Monk that I remember, and an occasional priest hunter comp or a priest rogue comp or something like that every once in a while, but I don't remember them being like super crazy, super wild. But it could be decent. I'm just gonna put it on great for now because I don't remember seeing a huge amount of it, and I feel like I remember playing with paladins and helping my friends get their gladiator titles, and it just being such an uphill battle to try and get them. I don't think it was completely unplayable, but I think the other healers had some much stronger mechanics than Holy Paladin did. But maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe Paladin ends up being really good at the beginning stages because it ends up being really super bursty and you need their cooldowns. But I remember Paladin being on sort of the weaker end. Ret Paladin was either really strong or really weak depending on what you fought against. It was incredibly weak against Warlocks and Ellies. You just get knocked around, bullied. There was nothing you could do. But you absolutely slaughtered melee. You could slaughter warriors and rogues and all the melee DPS, but you lost to wizards. So it's kind of like, strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to put it here on good tier. I think that it was just way too polarizing overall to put it much higher than this. You had decent mobility in this expansion with the Judgment Sprint that I remember flying around, but I think that you definitely struggled with casters. Now, whether or not those casters end up actually being that strong in the first season, given that stats are going to be lower, might play into a factor for this, but I don't remember Ret Paladin being like this crazy. So maybe it's just because I played Boomkin Warlock, and anytime I saw a Ret, it was just a free win. Maybe there were other comps that did actually fear it a little bit more than this. This is the one that I'm most skeptical of its ranking at the moment, but I'm going to leave it here for now. Discipline Priest is definitely better than Holy. You pretty much exclusively had to play with hunters. I remember it was either jungle or Ret Hunter type of compositions, or Rogue Hunter, but I think even Rogue Hunter preferred a Shaman. Disc was kind of just like middle of the pack, so I'm going to put Disc kind of here on the great tier above Holy Paladin. But I don't think it was better than the other options. I think it definitely struggled to keep up with them in terms of overall throughput. Holy Priest, this is the Chakra expansion where you could kind of stance swap. And I remember a lot of Holy Priests really liked that mechanic. I thought it was really fun. I think a lot of people thought it was super sleeper. I don't really know where to put it because I think there was literally only one guy that even played Holy the entire expansion. But even in tournament play, he switched over to Shaman. I'm pretty sure he switched over to Shaman, which tells me that I don't think it was good unless there's something people just didn't know about back then, which is entirely possible because information was still a lot more limited back then than it is now in Modern WoW. But I'm going to leave it here on good tier because I don't see a lot of people running with it. Now, Shadow Priest, though, I'm putting this up on a god tier. This guy was a bad boy in Mists of Pandaria. You had a ton of damage. This is when they introduced the 3-orb DP and just absolutely could crush people. Lots of instant range CC, really tanky and durable, tons of utility, really good specialization, especially if you played with a Frost Mage. There were some patches where you could play with a Feral Druid, but I think Frost Mage is going to be kind of the main staple composition for you in the expansion. Assassination, I don't remember seeing any. I pretty much the only rogue spec I remember even doing decently well was Subtlety. So Assassination, I'm gonna take a risk here. I'm gonna put it on trash because I think it was not that great. Subtlety, now if you played with Hunter, I remember a couple Thug Cleaves like Peekaboo played a lot of it. I think that you could make Subtlety work. I'm going to put it onto good tier, but you had to be like the absolute best player. This was not a great expansion for Rogue. Almost every Rogue that qualified from the Cataclysm AWCs had to re-roll to Warrior during the MOP AWCs, and I really don't remember that changing throughout the expansion. Just like occasionally like a Hunter Rogue one-shot cheese with Subtlety and Marksman. I remember that through Mists of Pandaria, which could still happen, but Assassin didn't have that kind of potential. Same thing with Combat. I think Combat was really lackluster. I remember, I think might have played with like Woundman or something like that, and he would just wanted to play Combat. That's all he wanted to play, and he would try and make it work, and it was just not a thing. It was just not a thing. So it was not a great expansion to be a Rogue for sure. Subtlety, I think, was the only spec that showed even some potential. Ellie Shaman, I'm going to end up having too many classes on God tier here, I think, but I sincerely think that it deserves to be up here. It won one of the championships. It was in the finals. It was a really good specialization. It just had a ton of instant cast damage. You could just absolutely one-shot people with RNG, and I think Nature's Guardian was one of the most OP defensives on Shaman, where you just dipped low HP and you got this auto heal that saved you, so you wouldn't die in these deep freeze silence one shots because you had that emergency heal. And it was really good at disrupting mages, really good at disrupting Shadow Priests, and it kind of fit into that kind of rock paper scissors. Although Ellie Warlock teams could struggle with Feral Druid cleave comps to my memory, and even possibly some Hunter cleave comps. Like a Death Knight Hunter even could likely be really tough for it, but I there's no doubt that I think it's deserving being up here. Now, Resto Shaman, main weakness was just getting trained into the dirt. That's Train the Blue. I feel like it originated probably in Kata, but it carried forward definitely into Mists of Pandaria. But it was still really good, really solid, just well-rounded kit. Good personal with Nature's Guardian. You're really good into wizards and casters. Wind Shear and Grounding, just always universally really strong in PvP scenarios. I'm going to put it a bit weaker than Resto Druid. I think just with add-ons, with DR trackers, with everything else, that Resto Druid was actually the best healer for the expansion. And particularly the Frost Mage Shadow Priest. And if you could switch out the Shadow Priest for a Warrior so you could fight Warlock teams, you were just like unbeatable, at least in tournament settings. And I think Resto Druid was likely the best healer of the expansion. It's really good instant cast healing, really fast CC, tons of DRs, insane mobility. Whereas Resto Shaman had clear defining weaknesses like getting trained in one shot. So I'm going to put it a little bit lower, but definitely the second best healer for sure. Enhance was really cheesy and fun. It had really big one-shot damage with Stormblast. I remember that. I even played some like boomy Enhance for fun and tried cheesing people with Star Surges, and it was really fun. But I don't remember it being like insanely good. I think Beast Cleave was probably the main composition, or maybe a Warrior. I'm going to put it onto great tier for now with Feral Druid, because I think it was super fun. It's kind of like it is on the War Within right now, where you pop the sentence and you just absolutely cranked, and then it was kind of just, oh, I guess that's it, I'm done. So I'm gonna put it on great, just for that reason. It could definitely cheesy one shot. It was definitely one of the best like noob specs in the game, but I think overall performance was a little bit lower than that. Affliction Warlock, bro, you guys are gonna get mad at me, bro. You guys are gonna get mad at me. There's no doubt you're gonna get mad at me. It was kind of like these two types of caster setups were dominating, right? Ellie Warlock and then Mage Shadow Priest, and these guys were kind of ruling the ladder. And this was stronger into this, but this was stronger into the melee, and this was weaker into the melee, and it was a triangle. But I think that Affliction had such variety of compositions, which is the main reason for being up here. Its own personal power is a spec, but also the compositions it had available to it, I think for sure. Now, Demonology is a tough one because in the initial stages of Mists of Pandaria, Demonology was the Warlock spec to play. Chaos Wave was really crazy damage, but that got nerfed. And then after it got nerfed, I think pretty much every Demo lock re-rolled from Demo to Affliction. So I don't even know if Demo ended up even being remotely viable after it got nerfed from its initial Chaos Wave patch at the beginning of Mists of Pandaria. It's possible that it could, so I don't want to put it on trash, because if it didn't, it's probably trash. So take that into consideration. It could be trash. I'm gonna leave it up on good for now, just because it's gonna be season 12. Everyone remembers Chaos Wave. They remember Demo locks on that patch. But I don't think I think it got nerfed, and with those nerfs being applied back to season 12, it might not be as good. So it could be anywhere from here. I think it'd be very weird if it ended up being higher than this, though. So yeah, Destro Warlock was really fun. Big Chaos Bolt. This is when you had the original OG Chaos Bolt animation, and I remember Warlock Destro just ruling the ladder, just absolutely dominating. I think Thugonomics trolled Zaryu in MOP, and he equipped a blacksmith hammer on his rank 1 game, and they didn't get rank 1 because he's wearing obviously a blacksmith hammer that doesn't have stats on it, and he mailed the hammer to Zaryu to troll him, like, look, this is what I was wearing or something. I remember that. They played every day. It was Mage Lock, Mage Lock, Mage Lock, Mage Lock, Mage Lock, Destro Mage, just Destro Mage, and I could see Destro Mage absolutely destroying, but I think it was easier to shut down than Affliction. I think the instant cast, a lot of these classes could dampen Destro and just kind of run away from it. Warriors are really tough. So I think because of that, I'm going to put it only onto the best tier. I'm not going to put it onto the God tier. I think just the instant cast survivability of these specs is a little bit better. Also, the comp variety of these specs is a little bit better than Destro. But Destro was really good. It was really good. Fury Warrior, I don't remember seeing any. Everybody was arms. So I'm taking a big jump with saying that I think that this one was probably trash. But I don't remember seeing like any at all. Like it was very rare if you ever saw one, I think. And I don't remember it being insanely good. So I'm pretty confident of putting Fury Warrior down here. Frosty K, another one. I think Frosty K ended up getting nerfed a lot because in Kata it had a bunch of instant cast CC like Hunger and Cold that just got nerfed, and then after that Frosty K kind of just disappeared. And I don't remember Frosty K being super prevalent in Mists of Pandaria. Everybody was unholy, but I think maybe it was probably like average. I think DK Hunter was still a really good comp. Maybe you could play that. I don't remember DK Windwalker really popping up actually until Warlords of Draenor as like a mainstay composition. Maybe it could actually come back. I don't know if anybody ever actually considered it, but Frost was it was just kind of non-existent also. So my expectation is that it's probably average at best or even lower than that. Unholy DK, I do remember being good. I think DK Hunter was definitely a really sleeper comp. It's a couple DK Warriors. I'd say it's less common than DK Hunter, at least for compositions. Had decent overall damage. It was really good at slaying shamans, gripping shamans in. I remember it was like Wreckful would go fishing. He'd play like DK Mage. They'd put a Ring of Frost down and a Death Knight would grip people onto it. I don't think that strat was necessarily the most competitive strat. That's just a memory I have from Mists of Pandaria. I'm probably going to rank this one a little bit lower though. I'm going to put it on great. Probably the best of the great tier though. That's why it's on the left. I think it was still really good. I think the 100 DK comp could provide a lot of annoyances and disruptions for this, and maybe it ends up being higher than this, given that the item level is going to be lower in season 12. But I think it had some problems with warriors likely at times. But I do remember it being a pretty common composition. I'm not really going to rank the tank specs just because it's impossible for me to remember. I don't remember ever seeing a Brewmaster Monk. Windwalker Monk. Okay, this was like the best time to play a Windwalker in my mind of any expansion. Like if you're gonna play PvP, and it's like there are certain specs that you like absolutely. If you're a Windwalker main and you didn't play Mists of Pandaria, Windwalker, you just missed out on like the prime time to play Windwalker Monk. It was so cool. You had this Storm, Earth, and Fire was in a cooldown. It split yourself into a clone, and that clone would attack a target. So you could put a bunch of clones on different targets, and it would duplicate your abilities. So you could put Mortal Strike on multiple targets, pressure multiple targets, and then pull all your images together, and then go all in on a target for single target. So it had this really crazy mechanic that no other classes had, and they removed that mechanic for whatever reason. It was such a cool and unique mechanic. I remember being really tough to kill. It was really strong defensively. Could slay healers. It was really well rounded. Do I take the risk and put this onto God tier for the best melee? We have no best melee at the moment, so I think I'm going to. I think I'm going to take the risk on this one. I'm going to put Windwalker onto God tier. I think it was just really good. It had tons of control. The split mechanic was so fun to play with Warlocks. I think Warlock Windwalker was the most common comp at that time, but I could see, possibly some cleaves in the earlier seasons, and maybe even some other variants of compositions, which I'm excited to try. I feel like a lot of people didn't try a lot of different pairings for compositions of classes, but Windwalker was just really good. It was really good. It was super sleeper. And I think given that Warriors got nerfed throughout MOP from the Taste for Blood stacks, Windwalker, I think, ended up being one of the few melee that could deal with all these casters with how tanky and its mobility that it had. It could actually be one of the few melee to actually deal with it. Maybe DK was the second best for dealing with that type of stuff. But it was really good. It was really fun. I remember it very fondly. So much so that maybe I might play one. I don't know. Just to, because I never got to really experience it either. I just played against it and remember pulling my hair out. That's why I'm bald. It was Windwalker Monks using Paralyze on me, and I can't play the game. My Shaman dying. But this was one of the best times. If you're a mage or a monk, or an Ellie even, this is the best time, I think, to play WoW PvP as some of these specs. Other specs, though, not so much. These guys down here, probably not so much. You're probably going to want to avoid those. If you want to be the hipster and go for that, then I'm not going to try and dissuade you. But I think these specs likely are kind of more cheesy or just going to completely struggle. Some of them I'm a bit speculative. I think Ret could be a bit better, especially in the earlier seasons of Mists of Pandaria, but I'm being a bit more conservative with the ranking there, just based on my experience with it, my memory of it. But other than that, thank you guys very much for tuning into the video. Hope you guys enjoyed this update and discussion. Hope it helps you with selecting your class and specialization for Mists of Pandaria Classic, and I will see you in the next one.